Oh, come on.
Research-based interventions.
Research-based interventions and how to do that. Absolutely. We'll talk about that today. Come on, you guys have to share more than this.
Everybody be on, and our teams be on the same page and get the same information.
Teams are on the same page, you get the same information.
We're consistent through buildings.
Absolutely, and not just in the buildings, but if you only have 2 buildings, that's one thing.
Right.
But district-wide, right? Absolutely. Because kids don't have needs that come and go necessarily based upon the building they walk into. They may if it's a systems thing, but not if they are a kid that really has something going on with that kid. So we'll absolutely talk about that. So one of the things you might want to do today as we go through, when we talk about those systems issues, is kind of jot those down as opposed to instructional or kid issues, that communication, collaboration thing. What else? Somebody over here, I stay over here so they answer. What about over here? I'll come pick on a table. I'm only going to pick on the front tables because you can't. Everybody's putting their head down. You're just like kids. Somebody over here say something. You don't want to listen to me talk all day. Thank you.
How can we utilize already existing resources to integrate the academics?
Absolutely. Utilize existing resources. So I want to make a point about that. MTSS and RTI is not a program. It's not something different. It's the glue to make what you're doing more impactful. There's not a lot that's new necessarily. But we work in silos. Teachers work in silos. Buildings work in silos. We have data that we have and we don't use. And so how do we create a system to take all of our resources and integrate them to make them more powerful than if everybody's just working hard but working separately? Yes? That concept. So, when we first start doing work with a building or a district, people say, oh, we've been doing RTI forever. And then when we look at it, it's like, well, you've been doing the components of RTI, but you never put them together. So we're going to talk about a lot of that integration today. What else? These are good questions. Or comments. What else? Help me out here. Because I'm doing this to be sure that I get to what you want. Okay. All right, let's switch to the second question. Why do you think in a place there might be all of a sudden such an increase in kids being placed in special ed? What are some thoughts about what might contribute to that? Yes?
At least in my district, we've had a consistent decrease in early intervention and then paired with a consistent increase in the expectations and the standards.
So yeah, so you've had an increase in early intervention.
No, decrease.
A decrease. Okay. Absolutely. I don't want to go out too far, but I want to put some things in context. And I'm going to put some stakes in the sand. I'm not the kind of guy that is going to just always be nice. I'm going to challenge you here. And if you don't agree with me, that's awesome, because at least it's rattling your head. So I do not believe there is any excuse for not having 97% of your kindergartners leaving kindergarten with beginning first grade literacy skills. A guy named Daniel Hernandez did a wonderful study reported a couple of years ago at AERA. It was funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and it was a longitudinal study of kids in poverty and what put them off track for graduation and poor post-secondary outcomes. And he compared the impact of poverty with the reading proficiency or lack of it at the end of 3rd grade. And for kids living in abject poverty, what predicted that they graduated on time and had positive post-secondary outcomes was their reading level at the end of 3rd grade. Just because kids are poor and come from an impoverished background, that is not a disability. And that should not be an excuse for why we can't teach them to read. Reading is the most critical skill for education. Now, everybody else who's not involved with reading doesn't like that. It's not that you're not loved or anything like that. It's just what the data say. If you can't read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade, your risk factor is amazing. So why can't kids from backgrounds, frequent flyers? I live in an area where we have a huge migrant population. A lot of the fruit on that plate there comes from the state I live in. So we have oranges, we have grapefruit, we have strawberries, huge amount of strawberries for the nation. Then we have nuts. I mean, the kinds you eat, not the watermelons. We do have nuts too. And these people move around from crop to crop. So they're in a place for 2 or 3 months and then they move. We have schools with 97% free and reduced lunch, 99% of the kids do not speak English, and these schools make proficiency. But we also teach reading 180 minutes a day to kids. Everything is about reading in those schools. So there is no reason why we can't have those outcomes if they are important to us. So I totally agree. When and this is just some systemic things. If you want the biggest bang for your buck, regardless of what you're doing with education, put 70% of your resources into kindergarten, first and second grade, put 70% of your resources into sixth grade, and put 70% of your resources into ninth grade. Kids coming out of ninth grade in credit recovery are awful predictors for good things happening to them. We have all of our middle school kids getting pseudo credits beginning in sixth grade so they understand the relationship between the grade they get and credit. Because I don't care what your GPA is in high school, it doesn't matter what it is. If you don't have the minimum number of credits, you ain't graduating. And for kids to learn the credit lesson after they've lost it in ninth grade puts them behind the 8 ball. So I could go on and on about prevention and early intervention, absolutely. So what happens is kids get farther and farther behind, they get behind, and then people look at them and they don't look at the whole picture and say, wow, this kid is 2 years below grade level, must have, his special ed can help him out, okay? Remember this, the National Longitudinal Data Survey that occurs every 2 years that tracks outcomes for kids in our nation's schools. 57% of kids enrolled in programs for students with specific learning disabilities are unemployed 1 year post-secondary. So how's that working for us? So we really have to look at what we're doing and what the outcomes are. And we can't spread it out pre-K-12. We have to insert our energy and our services into strategic points that make differences for kids before they get far behind. Sixth grade, because we want to get them all structured up for middle school. Ninth grade, we've moved almost exclusively to ninth grade academies. We call them that. Ninth grade is treated differently than the rest of high school. And you know that for the women in here, young women in ninth grade look a whole lot different than young men. Young men look like they're in third grade. and so those differences are vast in ninth grade and coming out of middle school. So the risk is always at the beginning of a level. So then why do we scatter our resources all over the place like we're trying to put dusting of flour on some bakery item? So food for thought. It's not just what we do, it's when we do it and where we do it. Great. I'm sorry that I went off on that, but you just hit the mark and they should give you your registration back or something for that. Unfortunately, I can't do that, but go tell them I said that. 2 points for you. What else? What else might be some reasons? Yes, sir.
Environmental factors.
I'm going to have
Environmental factors. So New York State has many old homes, but there's lots of things that are going on outside the school.
Yes.
That can affect
Absolutely.
ability.
It does. So outside factors, okay? The school district that I live in, one of our high schools, we have 79 languages and dialects spoken in the one high school. That's just a language issue. Our school districts are very large. I know that Buffalo, for example, is the second largest school district in the state of New York, but the size of Buffalo would at best be a medium-sized school district in my state. So we have state districts with 2 buildings all the way up to 5 of the 10 largest school districts in the United States. So we're county districts. So every large county has got abject poverty all the way to Tampa Bay Buccaneers living in gated communities, right? So that diversity and the size is taken into account. However, as I indicated with the example I gave for you is East Little Havana Elementary in Miami-Dade. It's in the heart of the city. Like I said, 97% free and reduced lunch. Nobody speaks English. The school makes proficiency because the school adjusted to the background and the needs of the students. 2.5 miles from East Little Havana is Coral Gables. The only thing at risk in Coral Gables is the gold lame animal. Because it's worn on shoes, belts, hats, all of this type of stuff. children that go to that school come out of the room with at least sound symbol association. At least, if not some reading fluency skills. Same district, 2.5 miles away. Their ELA, English Language Arts, is 72 minutes a day. That's it. Because that's all they need to have those kids do very, very well. So schools have to adjust to the kinds of kids that they have, and that's a challenge for districts. Because when you're doing policies and all of that kind of stuff, you want something that would apply to all the schools, but you can't have a policy that schools are reflective of their population. The other thing about MTSS, which you'll see in a moment, is that the allocation of resources to schools is based upon student need, not based upon the demographics of the population. So we don't give out equal numbers of teams, equal numbers of reading supporting. The schools that need it get it. And the schools that don't need it get less. And unless we do that, we're never going to close the gap. So we'll talk about how you use MTSS to do that. Thank you for that. What else? What are some other reasons? Just one thing, yeah.
I've never taught in another state, so I only have New York State to base any of my information on. But what I've noticed, I am an AIS teacher, 5th and 6th grade. So when the state implemented Common Core, which was hastily kind of implemented, in my opinion, all of a sudden things started to shift. A lot of numbers went up, and as far as students needing additional help. Now the Common Core itself, I think, is a good idea because it goes in depth instead of breadth. However, how it was implemented,
Yeah, I think
I'm
a lot
not in
of
charge.
states struggle with
So what I don't, and then just looking at some of the expectations of the Common Core, I mean, as far as brain development and what kids are able to do at certain ages, I think it's a little off. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it would increase special ed, but what it does is red flag students who have always been able to achieve
Sure.
through help of teachers and things like that. And all of a sudden now you have the state coming in and saying, okay, these kids need extra help because
Sure.
they achieved this on one test. And then all of a sudden now you have red flags where teachers are identifying more and more kids in their class who then may go on for testing.
So the Common Core raising expectations, different types of things, and I totally agree with you. I'm going to give you an example very quickly here. Part of the issue, that the question, this is a question, a rhetorical question not to be answered, is to what degree did schools and districts change to adapt to the Common Core, or do they try to keep doing what they were doing with the shift in the standard? So let me give you an example. On Monday of this week, because we're in end of session, so I can take a few days off to do this kind of stuff and support. I've known Teresa, so I go and do this in places where typically I either have friends or what have you. So on Monday, I was in Detroit, and a question came up: what do you do with a 10th grade student who's reading at the 3rd grade level with the standards? They have, everybody got their nose out of joint about Common Core state standards, and it became political. And what I was upset the most about with that is everybody was acting as if we never had standards in education before. It's like, wake up. We didn't crawl out from under a rock just because a bunch of governors decided to have Common Core state standards. I've been working with standards since I entered school, so you have to align your instruction with something. It's kind of like education is just random acts of teaching, and then finally somebody came in with instructions, right? It's like, learn your history. But what it did shift was what we valued as the outcome of education, which was critical thinking, problem solving, and reasoning. So the 10th grade, I may use an example today. I have to modify something if we do that. 10th grade literacy standard. None of the literacy standards in Common Core, if you look at the anchor standard, progression. For example, for comprehension. Nothing about the mechanics of reading are included in any of those. You won't see words correct per minute. You won't see fluency. You won't see vocabulary. You see what they're supposed to do with those skills. So it'll be like kindergarten. Recount from a familiar story. Okay. If you go to the 12th grade standard, those same words are in there. Key details and summarize. All the way through the standards. So kindergarten is actually teaching the foundation skill for the Anchor standards. And if our kindergarten folks and our reading and literacy folks don't put an importance on that, we have a problem. Kindergarten isn't passing a rain stick around singing Kumbaya and getting used to school. That's not what kindergarten is about. The foundation of literacy development for the Anchor standards occurs in kindergarten, and the same words are reflected in the 12th grade standards. So we have this 10th grade kid reading at the 2nd grade level. And maybe going away from today, I want you to challenge yourself a little bit. The standards are not about reading or doing math problems. The standards are about thinking. And just because a kid can't read words, or if a kid is dyslexic, remember reading is superimposing of a grapheme on a pre-existing phoneme. So a kid can't read apple. Are you telling me that that kid who can't read apple doesn't know what an apple is, doesn't use apple in his or her vocabulary every day? They've got the language in their head, they just can't match it up with the graphic representation of that. That used to be called word blindness. So are we going to say that a 10th grade student who's blind can't achieve the standard because they can't read physically words? So we're going to talk about that today. So if you have a kid in special ed, let's say this kid is special ed. Special ed might be focusing on removing that barrier to accessing content, but that kid can still be held accountable to the 10th grade standard. Just get the reading, decoding out of the way. Use text-to-speech, universal design, use something. Get a Kindle. Your Kindle will read to you if you don't want to read it yourself. So are we saying that because a kid can't read the words, a kid can't think? The standards are thinking standards. They are not the skills. And most of our kids who struggle have struggles with the skills. But if we remove that barrier, can they still think? So that's a wonderful question that you brought up. And I think you're absolutely right. But how do we approach the standards? There's nothing in the standards that say you have to physically read it. Nothing in the standards say that you have to write it. It says recount. That could be tell it, draw a picture of it. It could be a variety of things. It never says how it has to be presented and how it has to be performed. We just put our pre-existing expectations on that.
But in New York State, there's a test that you have to read and write.
Absolutely.
So.
But what if you can't? Are we going to pound that so much the whole time the kid could think? And we have 10th grade kids at the 3rd grade reading level who have been in school 10 years, and they've gotten to the 3rd grade. There's what's going to happen. And now we're still putting an hour and a half a day into teaching them to read, and they're moving 1/3 of a year in a year's time. What aren't they getting? What about science? What about literature? What would we do with the blind kid? And I know I'm in the same boat you are. I was a principal for 12 years as a district administrator, and we always get caught between these assessment issues and actually kids learning. And for some kids, the gap is so wide, we have to make a choice. So, very quickly, you can get accommodations, but not for things that require reading, right? So you can get accommodations for other higher order thinking aspects of the test, but not for reading. So kids are passing those, but not passing reading. They're thinking, they're problem solving, they're doing critical reasoning. But that test measured their disability. It didn't measure what their brain is capable of doing. And so we interpret those scores differentially. If other scores are high and this one is low and the kid was accommodated for the reading, we're like, that test measured the kid's disability. It'd be like asking a blind kid to do that. Why would we expect them to do that? So, but it's a great point because it's a reality.
And the teachers are scored.
Absolutely. And that's a systemic problem, but it still doesn't solve the kid's learning issue. So those are the system things. You're absolutely right. In my state, 5 years ago, we totally eliminated teacher tenure. It simply does not exist. But the union supported it because teacher retention is based upon student academic growth. Which person? John. So John, you're talking about a discrepancy model. They didn't hit the standard on the test. That is excuse me, folks, that is a lousy way to evaluate anybody. Because we're working with kids. We are in a growth world. I don't know where you teach, but let's say it's 6.
What principal?
But, okay, like you taught something at some point, probably.
Elementary.
Okay, yeah, they didn't just like drop you into it.
No, wait.
I woke up one day and I was a principal. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. So if you have a sixth grade teacher, a 5th grade teacher, let's say, kids in the 2nd grade, there's no way that kid's gonna make it. You know, unless you have a rabbi, an imam, a priest, a minister, somebody to do divine intervention. In our state, if you move that kid more, even a little bit, than the kid moved in the last 3 years, that's value added, and you are rewarded for that. You are held accountable for the growth students make from where you got them, not some arbitrary place. So the only reason I'm giving you that example is because that is how a system is not tied to how kids learn and how instruction occurs. It's almost like a business model for a non-business way of work. And I don't know what to tell you about that except it's stuck. But are we going to go toward trying to meet that expectation? Or are we going to come back and say, our kids have grown more in the last year than they've ever grown, and even though they don't pass the tests, we can demonstrate that our instruction was highly effective. That it's like, which do you pick? And to be honest with you, I hate to use the French, it sucks. And that's the reality, and you have to pick one side or the other. MTSS and RTI is a growth model, and we're going to talk about that. So thanks for bringing that up, I appreciate that. Are we good for now? Your questions and your comments. So there's one other area that I don't want to take up more time. Part of the issue, and a person over here said, I didn't hear her, but I saw her arm going, and the person right there in the orange, I think it's flower, but I can't tell. Is we just go from tier 1 to special ed. If you don't have resources in place, and you're doing the old pre-referral model, 3 interventions, move to the front of the class, give them peer assistance, and cut their work down. And if they don't improve to grade level in 7 days, we refer them for special ed. So here's the dilemma with interventions, and today is about instructional interventions. Is a kid is always behind until they catch up, right? So if the kid is really progressing, I'm going to ask you to interpret some graphs. The kid is really progressing and will get there, but is way far behind. The kid's always going to be behind until they get there. So the question is, are they growing fast enough to catch up? And John over here, the system ties him. It's like they got to be at this level instantly. That doesn't work. You all are educators. You know that. So our goal is to accelerate the growth rate of kids through the use of database decision making. That's what it is. So my job, in addition to what Teresa said, I have an academic side of me, although it gets less and less, is I'm responsible for all of the RTI stuff for the state of Florida. My partner in crime, a guy named Don Kincaid, who heads up the state PBIS, is the other half, and together we're MTSS, integrating of academics and behavior. Our problem-solving models, our tiers, everything about it is the same on the behavior side as it is on the academic side. The purpose of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, or core, supplemental, and intensive, it's all aligned. It's only the content that is different. In addition, I'm responsible for the whole State Department Student Services, which is school psychology, counseling, social work, nursing, school-to-work transition. And in addition to that, I'm responsible for the school improvement teams throughout the state of Florida that work with low-performing schools. We don't have low-performing districts per se, but we have low-performing schools within districts. And then I'm also responsible for HIV/AIDS education, for a component of early childhood, and I'm supposed to suck down all of the Medicaid and schools dollars as possible from the federal government and distribute them to public schools. And all that sounds like diversion, and I'm also responsible for 21st century learning community schools. All that sounds really diverse, but it isn't, because we operate on a multi-tiered system of supports for school improvement, for student services, What does a psychologist, counselor, social worker, nurse, what is done for everybody? What is done for some people? What are done for very few people? In schools that need help, what is done for all those schools? What is done for the ones that need additional help? And which ones do we send SWAT teams into? A multi-tiered system of district supports. So I want you to think today about how things are organized and what do we do for everybody in your building, in your district? What do we do for some kids? What do we do for very few kids? I was a building principal in a school where we also had 110 kids with severe behavior and learning problems. And it was a pre-K through 8 building. We had a multi-tiered system of support because even though they were kind of at the top of your triangle, there's something all of them needed. Some of them needed more, and a few of them really needed intensive services. And if we're giving everybody intensive services, we don't have enough peanut butter to cover the bread. So that's one thing I would like for you to think about today. The other thing is very simple. I try to keep this stuff simple because if it gets complicated, I don't get it. So here's the goal. For groups of kids or individual kids who are having a problem, are struggling, are not meeting expectations, I want you to come away today simply asking 4 questions. And my goal as a building principal was to have our entire staff thinking this way. So MTSS and RTI is a way of thinking. It's a way of work. It's not in a box. So here are the 4 questions. They're in your handout somewhere. What do I want kids to know, understand, and do? Cut. I want them to know academic stuff. I want them to know behavioral standards and expectations. I want them to understand it, and I want them to demonstrate it. We don't have any form that says referral problem, behavior problem. We don't work to eliminate problems. We work to teach kids what they need to know, understand, and do to be successful. So a meeting around a group of 5th grade kids who are not achieving literacy or math standards, that meeting starts out with, here's what they should be doing, here's what we want them to know, understand, and do. Here's where they are. Our effort here today is to find strategies to close the gap between where they are and where they should be. At no point did anyone talk about what their problems were. So that's the first step. The second step is, why aren't they doing it? And you'll see today we looked at 4 areas: instruction, curriculum, environment, and the learner. ISO. We only go to the L at a certain point. We'll talk about it today. We mainly look at ICE. How many of you would agree, put your hands up please if you agree, that most of the interventions we do for kids in schools, whether it's groups of kids or individual kids, are focused either on instruction, curriculum, or an environmental issue? How many of you would agree that that's the focus? We alter instruction. We look at curriculum. We try to alter environmental issues to make them more successful. Very seldom do we focus on trying to fix a kid. Yet where are all of our assessments? The kid. So our assessments are looking at the kid. Our interventions are in the ICE. That doesn't make sense. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. So that's the second question. Why aren't they doing it? Not why do they have the problem. Why aren't they doing the cut? The third question is, what are we going to do about it? And the fourth question is, did it work? Those 4 questions. It's a way of thinking, as opposed to lamenting about stuff, looking for excuses. We don't deal with that. Where what do we want them to know, understand, and do? Why aren't they doing it? That we have control over. What are we going to do about it? And did it work? And if we all thought that way, then that is an indicator that we're doing database decision making. So the last comment I want to make, and a number of the things we'll talk about are already in the slides, so we'll move through those when we get to them. I grew up in education in the era where acronyms are not good. Looking around the room here, most of you don't remember something called REI. Regular Education Initiative, when Madeline Will, who was the ex-wife of George Will, was the Secretary of Education. And that Regular Education Initiative really focused on improving general education so that we had prevention, all of this type of stuff. And people hated REI after like 4 or 5 years. I was worried, I have post-traumatic words that begin with R, acronyms that begin with R. So RTI came along, I really did not push for it. Myself and a group of people, we wrote the first book on what is now RTI, and I'm like, don't make it a 3-letter word that starts with R. We have a history of that not working out very well. But we love acronyms, okay? And so RTI is not an adjective. It's not a verb. So we don't have RTI time. And we don't RTI somebody. So if you have anything where RTI is used as an adjective, or it's a verb, we need to have a discussion about that. Or you just need, as you might imagine, my training and what have you is in psychology. That's what my doctoral degree is in. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a certified school psychologist, as well as an administrator and that kind of stuff. So I have a therapeutic view of the world, right? So I believe in cut it out therapy. Just cut it out. Quit it. It works really well. So quit using it as an adjective. So this is our RTI block. How's that different from pre-referral block? How's that different from special ed? How's that different from... It's just another adjective. It's a process. It's a way of thinking. RTI, response to instruction and intervention, is technically the 4th step of the problem-solving process. Did it work? That's all it is. So as we go through the day, we're going to talk about instruction, we're going to talk about all of that type of stuff. But the big idea is this is a way of thinking. If this entire table began approaching everything they did from what do we want kids to know, understand, and do, why aren't they doing it? You have an ISO matrix. You're looking at evidence-based instructional reasons why kids can't do this. And then focusing your data collection around verifying that. And if you do that, the intervention is going to be staring you in the face because you figured it out because it was the root cause of the problem. And everybody is always saying, is it working? How long are we going to wait in between assessments to figure out if this is working? And if you had rules for what if it isn't working, what is the standard response to it not working? And then every building, every team, every grade level subject area had that consistent approach, it changes the world. As opposed to everybody going off in some different direction. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So it is a way of thinking, it is a way of work. It doesn't come in a box, it's not an adjective, and it's not a verb. Good? All right. So I want to get you started. So here's some things for today. Key components of MTSS, implementing Common Core Learning Standards with it, integrating problem solving, aligning instruction with the Common Core Learning Standards, ensuring integration of academic skills, academic behaviors, and social emotional behaviors, meeting the needs of students with disabilities and 504 accommodations. What is the difference between specially designed instruction and intensive instruction? There's a huge difference. But if instruction doesn't look any different if a kid's receiving special ed services than kids who are simply getting intensive services, and if your SLD teachers have more kids on their class roll than are in any given classroom in the building, this is not an issue with instruction. This is an issue maybe with not enough instruction. It's an issue with how come an SLD teacher has 38 kids on his or her class roll and a regular classroom teacher has 24. And these kids are supposed to be getting more intensive services. The average number of minutes a day, that kids with learning disabilities get special ed instruction is 42 minutes a day. The rest of the 330 minutes are in the general ed classroom. So how does 42 minutes of instruction fix what's happening in 300? The other 300 minutes, 320 minutes. So those are some things. Have courageous conversations. Feel safe. Trust. Nothing comes out of compliance. Not when things are not working. Reflect, celebrate, reverberate, breathe, and get fired up. Now, I totally forgot about this. I may have to show you later. I don't see that I have audio here. Let me see if I can do it with this. That's all right. I think I knew I wasn't going to have it, so I do that. There's a really cool video. I may show it after break. So every system is perfectly aligned for the results that it gets. If you have been getting the same results in your building or district for 3 years and you're not happy with them, your system is very well designed to produce those poor results. And you do it consistently. And unless you change the system, the results are not going to change. Poor outcomes for kids are not random acts. They are systems that are aligned to produce poor results. So if you want to change and improve the climate, both for students and teachers, there are features of the school culture that have to be changed. And if they're not changed, all the well-intentioned efforts will have no... So somebody has to say enough is enough, is what that's basically saying. So 2 questions. Are you happy with your data? And is every classroom in your school or building one in which you would put your own flesh and blood? And if the answer to that is no, then fix it. Why are you putting other people's children in places you would never put your own? So just food for thought. There are 2 other things I want you to remember today too. The bumper stickers of MTSS. In God we trust. Everyone else brings data. If you're God, don't worry about it. Just fix it. And the other one is data will set you free. So when I come back here in 3 months, I want to see cars with bumper stickers. We put a grade retention thing in Florida a number of years ago, and actually it worked. But somebody who was opposed to it made bumper stickers that says, "My kid has been given the gift of time at Shady Hollow Elementary School," which means they got another year in a particular grade. So bumper stickers are good. Data will set you free. So let's suppose we have a table here, and we have a group of reading teachers that are really into balanced literacy. Another group that are absolutely into explicit instruction. And we have 2 or 3 approaches to teaching reading. And you asked me here, well, which is better? I don't know. I'm not going to engage in that discussion. What's working best for kids? And if you're implementing something year after year, and you're convinced that this is the best approach to reading or math or whatever, and the kids are not getting any better, I don't care how good the research is. It is not working for your kids. And what's Einstein's definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? So we're insane if we're doing that. So I don't ever get in discussions about pedagogical things. The data will tell us whether what we're doing is working or not. So some fundamental assumptions. There are no quick fixes. There's a need for general, special, and gifted education, but not as it currently exists. That's not a radical change, but we'll talk about that. Too much time is spent on admiring problems, admiring data. We're data-rich and decision poor. We have all this data, nobody ever does anything with it. No student is worthless, ever. Even the worst student is a good example of what is not working. So when we see kids that we're concerned about, complaining about, feel like we don't know what to do about, we have to say that they're an example of what is not working. So we have to find a way for it to work for that kid. And the best place to address diverse learning needs is in the instructional process. We spend, so I'm going to say this right now, we lead with instruction. All of our efforts, the majority, need to be put into instruction. Kids don't get better with a label. Kids don't get better because of policy changes. Kids don't get better because there's a new form. Kids only get better if the instruction works. So this is my view. You don't have to share it. I believe the most important people for kids are general education teachers. Special ed, gifted ed, alt ed, student services, we are all there to support general education teachers. Because the reality show of education is if you don't make it in general education, you're not going to make it in the outside world. I have yet to see a McDonald's. I don't know, do you have Chick-fil-A here? Oh, you don't? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, man. Chick-fil-A is like, next time if I come, I'll bring like 500 of them and sell them. McDonald's or whatever. There's no line. There's no tier 1, 2, or 3 line. There's no line for kids who don't speak English or kids who are struggle with reading or math. All the supports that kids have don't exist when they leave school. So the best predictor of how a kid's going to do after school is how they're doing in the general education classroom, because that best mirrors life. And we're going to talk to you about, you can do progress monitoring and formative assessments if you're a remedial person, if you're a special ed person, whoever you are. But unless those formative assessments predict what happens in tier 1, it doesn't do any good to show the kids improving with you when those standards are accelerating faster than that improvement, the kid's actually getting farther behind. We're going to see what that looks like today. So all of our assessments for everything that's not general ed are based upon general ed standards and criteria. Improvement is a necessary but insufficient thing for kids to close gaps, because they have to be improving faster than the standard is growing to close a gap. So we'll talk about that today. So here's the central question, I'll give you a take home. The central question is not, what is it about the students that are causing the performance discrepancy, but what is it about the interaction of curriculum, instruction, learners, and the environment that should be altered so that students will succeed? We're not looking at the student, we're looking at the interaction of these things. So here's a tabletop. What about the culture of your school will facilitate this shift in thinking? And what about the culture of your school will be a barrier to the shift of not always looking at the kid, but looking at the interaction of curriculum, instruction, and the environment? So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes to talk about that. And then we'll move on. Go.